Hello friends, welcome to In the Studio with Pyramid Dyeworks. My name is Liz. I am the owner of the studio of Pyramid Dyeworks. It's been a while since I have sat down in front of a camera. Might be a New Year's resolution to do this on a regular basis from here on out, so we'll see how that goes. I really do want to make an effort to reconnect with the online community this year. I kind of stopped recording podcasts, honestly, because I started going to an in-person knitting group and I kind of felt like I was getting my geek out time talking to people about knitting in person. Oh, Conan. Yes. This house is full of animals. There are 2 dogs and 2 cats here. They might make appearances. All right, move on. Go. Anyway, yeah, honestly, I started geeking out with people in person about knitting, and then it felt a little bit silly sitting down and doing it on the internet as well. So I'm coming back to it now this year because I want to geek out on knitting and fiber and textiles more this year. This year, I really want to lean into my creative pursuits and really lean into my making and my natural dyeing and expanding my studio and just doing more creative things and not letting myself get bogged down in just kind of the everyday slump of stuff. So I'm also hoping that by documenting more, by sharing more, that is going to help with my creativity and my accountability. And I really just want to be here to serve as a little bit of inspiration, a little company while you're crafting. I really enjoy watching knitting podcasts in the morning with my coffee and my knitting. It really helps me get into a good space for the day. So it has been quite a while since I have shared anything with anybody. I have a little bit on Instagram, but I've just been really bad about photographing finished objects. And I have just not been a very good social media presence, frankly. But, you know, it's not our natural state, right? Here we are, it's 2025. I'm going to share with you what I am working on, what is going on in my studio right now. And I am planning to come back to you every 2 weeks to update with progress and with new projects. So first of all, I will mention what I'm wearing. This is the Norma sweater. It is a pattern by Petite Knit. I knit this out of not necessarily plutalopi, but unspun Icelandic. So I went to Iceland a few years ago and I did like one of those tours where they go and drive you around all day and you go to all the touristy spots. So I found one of these tours that stopped at a fiber farm. And you could go and meet the animals. So that was kind of the thing that it played up, was like you could go and meet the animals, but it also said that they had their own yarn shop at the farm. So I was like, okay, that's the tour that I'm signing up for. So most of this yarn is from that farm, and I got to meet the sheep. One of the colors is actually plutalopi that I also got on that same trip. I don't remember. I think the white one is actually plutalopi, but the black and the orange are the farm yarns. And honestly, whenever I went to go and block this, it is the nastiest water I have ever seen. It was like I was watching a raw fleece or something. There was so much like dirt and debris, and like my bathroom smelled like a wet sheep, like hardcore. I had to rinse this thing like 3 or 4 times before the water started running clear. But regardless, it is unspun Icelandic. It's just like plutalopi, but it's from the Soul Farm. Um, I love this sweater so much. I am wearing it constantly. I did another trip earlier this fall. I went over to Europe and went to Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. I bought a lot of yarn. I'm not going to go through it all. It'll come up as it comes. I'm sorry if you like haul and acquisition things, but we're not doing that here. It's too much. It's too much. We're starting fresh today, moving forward. Point being, I took this sweater with me and it was like the perfect travel sweater. I love Icelandic wool because somehow it's unspun Icelandic wool. I should rephrase that. Somehow it is simultaneously not too hot and the warmest thing you've ever put on your body. It's like magic. I love it. Okay, this pattern. I knit this as a knit along with my in-person knitting group. So several of us knit this sweater. None of us liked the pattern. None of us liked the pattern. Just the way it was written was very confusing. There were a lot of sections where I was like, I don't understand the pattern writer or the tech editor who decided that somehow writing short rows in sets of 3 made sense. Like, just move your beginning of... Just the way it was written was very unintuitive. Everybody in my knit group had trouble with it. That being said, I stopped following the pattern at a certain point. I definitely ignored some of the details. There was some sort of slip stitch detail somewhere at some point. I completely ignored that. I split for sleeves way sooner than the pattern said to. It has very, very deep sleeves in the way the pattern's written. So I split like a full like row repeat section earlier. So like it should have been down here where it split. Does that make sense? And it's already quite a deep arm scythe there. So that was kind of my main modification. I also made the neck a little bit wider because it's this mock neck, and I knew this is unspun Icelandic. It's not the softest thing in the world. So I didn't want it right up on my neck. So it sits out a little bit, but it's still close enough that it helps protect from the wind, which is really nice. I even added a few extra increases in the body to give it a slight A-line shape because I wanted it to be nice and relaxed. And I freaking love this thing. It has been the sweater that I go to like almost every time. I love my finished object. So yeah. Let's move over more to the studio side of things. So I am kind of making a mental demarcation between personal project and studio projects. So studio projects, I'm considering anything that is not just like a personal make to be a studio project because it's something that I am actively learning, improving my skills. Cat butt. I'm working on those skills to get towards an end goal with my fiber arts business, right? So right now it's the middle of winter, it's January, it's cold outside. I have a natural dye studio, which is my back porch. I do rainwater collection for my natural dyes. And that is a big block of ice right now. So not much is happening in the natural dye studio right now. So what is happening is skill building. So this is the first thing from my in the studio. I have been learning how to weave. So this is a fun new skill that I had said at one point I would never do. Like you always say, and then you do it anyway, right? So I came into a rigid heddle loom last year. I taught myself how to weave. I have done a few projects. I gifted some scarves for Christmas, so I got some good practice. But I really want to look at weaving as a way to get natural dye and wool products out into the market in a sort of economically plausible way. Weaving is so much faster than knitting. It's so much faster. Like, knitting is something that you do for love. I feel like, at least compared to knitting, weaving is so fast to me. I'm like, oh my God, I could actually weave naturally dyed scarves and have those as a product for people. Because the number one question I get asked whenever I am out doing pop-up dye demos, I'm doing, booth at a festival or something, the number one question I get is, do you have anything that's like finished that I can buy? Like, I don't knit, I don't crochet. Do you have anything that's finished that I can buy? It's like, no, no, we don't. Because anything would be out of your price range, frankly. So I've kind of been looking at weaving as a way where I can maybe bridge that gap a little bit. And get something that isn't going to take so much of my time, that isn't going to take so much of somebody else's money, that I can get some of these amazing wool products out into the market. Because people just don't understand like how good wool is. Especially here, I see it all the time. I live in a small town that's a ski town, essentially. We have several ski resorts around the area, like 5 within like a 45-minute drive. There's a lot. Anyway, point being, you go up to the ski resorts and you just see people walking around in these polyester beanies, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, you guys, you just don't even know. That's also something on my 2025 wish list, is to get a circular knitting machine so I can start making hats. Because those poor skiers up there in their little cotton polyester beanies, and they're just freezing. They're all freezing. So anyway, without further ado, this is my most recent weaving project. I just took it off the loom this morning. It has not been washed, but oh my God. And I haven't done anything with tassels yet. Those are still all just loose. But I made a scarf out of hand spun. Look at this. So unfortunately, this is like not technically naturally dyed. My warp is naturally dyed. Is that right? My warp, yes. My weft is the hand spun, which was acid dyed from some top that I bought. So it was like a braided top. So the braid that I bought was a lot of different colors blended together. So it wasn't like a gradient. It wasn't like a color changing braid. It was like off of a drum carder braid probably, or a blending board braid or something, because it had like streaks of color going through it. So it made the coolest yarn, but I did not know what to do with it at all. Like, I don't know if I can focus. We'll get some close-ups in here. The variation in the color in this yarn is just unbelievable. I love it so much. It's like too cool. It is too cool. It was so much fun to weave. Like, it's just plain weave, just a plain weave. But that is all this needed. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. So I think I love weaving with handspun. This seems to be a theme that is recurring. I love knitting with handspun because of the way handspun feels in the hand. It has this great energy to it that you just don't get in commercially spun yarns. Like you can just feel the energy that's been put into this yarn, like the kinetic energy. And I love knitting with handspun for that reason. However, hey, second, stop. He's chewing on firewood. However, I don't love how, especially the multicolored handspun works up in a knit fabric. Like I said with those socks, I don't like pooling. I don't like it when you get those weird color blobs and things like that. I'm just not a fan of it. But in the weaving, holy moly, I kind of love it. Like, I kind of love it hard. Like, I love, oh. Yeah, so I'm gonna tie the ends off in some little twisted tassely things. So much fun. And give this a good wash. And this one's gonna be for me, but I am very happy with my improvement in my weaving skills. My tension is very even. I had one side where my edge looks great. The other side, the edge looks kind of sloppy. I don't know why. My cat did use my warp as a hammock, so maybe that has something to do with it. It's just so cute. I can't tell him no. So another thing I did this week in the studio, I'm considering this in the studio because it's work. It's not fun. I mended things. I have a pile of sweaters and accessories that need mending. As I've been going through my sweater drawer, as it's been getting colder, and I pull out sweaters and I'll find one little spot where, oh, you've lost a stitch there. And so I have just been piling everything up. Cat is playing with packaging. I apologize. So I finally sat down the other day and I got through some of the mending. So please join me while we fix things. So let's just go through what I am knitting on right now. So first off, oh no, we have squeaky toys now. Pause. So here is my first whip in this adorable little Japanese knot bag. I got this as a Christmas gift with my, my knit group did a Secret Santa, and my Secret Santa made me this bag. It's so cute. It has little sheepies on it. And it is just the perfect size for socks. And it is also the perfect size to fit in my purse. So that is very handy. So in here, I have some socks in progress. Oh, puppy dog. So these are the socks that I have been working on. I am knitting these up out of Mending. This is my first time working with this yarn. It is a non-superwash sock yarn from Portugal, right? Retrosaria Pomar. fine I will read the label, excuse me. Mending is a non-superwash sock weight yarn made from fine Portuguese wool. And it is quite lovely. And it has this adorable label. So I have these two different colors here. This brown one is C582. And this multicolored one is M77, if that's helpful to anybody. So I picked these up whenever I was in Portland, Oregon last spring. I went up there for the Rose City Yarn Crawl, and I bought a lot of yarn. Again, we're not going to do an acquisition. We're not going to do a haul. You'll just see things as I work on them. So this is from my Portland haul. I'm really enjoying working with the yarn. It feels very rustic. It's definitely not what you would think of from like a regular sock yarn, like a merino nylon sock yarn. It feels quite rustic. It feels quite crunchy, and it feels quite thin. However, I have a sneaking suspicion that once these get washed and the yarn can bloom a bit, that it's really gonna fill in quite nicely. I have to admit, I'm not a huge fan of this color. Not loving it. I really hate pooling, and this is doing like a really obvious, like sort of diagonal striping situation. Not my favorite thing in the world, I have to admit. It really isn't. But I really like the yarn itself. So I'm going to carry on, and I'm going to do, heels, toes, and cuffs in the contrasting color. And I think I'm going to have plenty of yarn left to make a second pair. Maybe with the colors reversed or doing stripes or something different. But yeah, I'm going to have to find make a second pair of socks out of the color that I don't really like. But whatever. We're just going to carry on. Okay. So these are the socks that I'm working on right now. I usually work on my socks during Zoom meetings. Because generally speaking, I don't do complicated sock patterns. I forgot to even say, I'm just doing a sock recipe. I'm not even doing like a pattern that I'm following or anything. I'm just doing 3x1 rib across the top. It's plain stockinette across the back. Size US 1, 64 stitches. That's usually what I do. And I will do a German short row heel for the heel. So, I can work on those in a Zoom and not really have to look at my hands all that much, which is fine. And, honestly, most of the time, everybody else is looking down in those meetings too, so it doesn't matter. And even if they knew I was knitting, I don't think they would care. Okay, so my next whip is a sweater. And this one is also from my Portland yarn haul. So, check this out. Oh my God, it's so pretty. Look at that. Oh, it's so good. Okay, so this pattern is, let's see if I can remember. This pattern is Tuku by the Petite Knitter. Not Petite Knit, the Petite Knitter. It's very confusing. They're two different people. So yes, I am using the Gilead from Dyeworks Natura. It is a French merino non-superwash. It's about a worsted weight. It's amazing. It's springy. It's bouncy. It is making the most like squishy, cozy fabric. I'm very excited about this sweater. I think I might have to buy more yarn. That is the drawback of buying a sweater quantity without a project in mind. Is I just kind of guessed and I was like, well, I'll get this many and hope that's enough. And I might not have quite enough to finish this project, so I might have to buy one more ball of this orange. which is kind of a bummer. I'm hoping that there's no issue with color difference across lots, because I bought this in March. And the shop where I bought it from doesn't have anything else in stock, so I'm gonna have to buy it from a different stockist, which I'm sure is not gonna be the same lot. I don't feel like they're gonna have a lot of variation between their lots, but I don't know. If anybody has any experience, please let me know. Regardless, I am going to just carry on until I get to the point where I'm going to switch to ribbing. And then I'm just going to put the body on hold, and I'm going to go ahead and switch to the arms, to the sleeves, and knit the sleeves and see how I'm doing on yarn. Because if I do have to get an extra ball that is a different color lot, if there is any slight variation, if I can just have the last ball be the ribbing, that should visually give enough demarcation that it's not going to be jarring to the eye if it's a little bit different in the ribbing versus the body. Whereas if there was like a line going across the body or across the sleeves or something where the color obviously shifts. So that's the plan. So I'm going to carry on with this. It is moving right along. Hopefully it won't take me too much longer. Alterations to the pattern. I did do a couple of things. So I went ahead and I sized down for the ribbing on the neckline. The pattern did not suggest to do that, but I went ahead and went down on my ribbing needle size. And I also added in some short rows before the color work, which the pattern also did not have that. And then whenever I split for sleeves, I put more fabric on the front than on the back. I do have a rather large bust, so I often have to make adjustments for that whenever I am knitting or sewing, etc. Whenever I'm sewing, I will do full bust adjustments often. Knitting, I have done this one other time on a circular yoke sweater where I just literally set the sleeves back a little bit further so there's just more fabric across the front, and it worked out great. I actually did that with this sweater as well. I forgot to mention that with this Norma sweater, I gave more stitches to the front of the body than to the back whenever I divided for the raglan. And it worked great. It works great. It fits so well, so well. So that's a really, really easy thing that you can do to adjust for fit. Which, I mean, frankly, anybody with a bust, especially on circular yokes, because usually those are just split, right? Like right down the middle. Same thing with raglans. You have the same stitches on the front that you do on the back. And it's like, you literally have more physical space to take up in the front than you do on the back. So a lot of times, especially with circular yokes, I have definitely found if you're knitting for a size that it's going to fit your full bust, then the back just ends up real loosey-goosey and like has extra fabric. And that's just not the funnest. So you just put extra stitches on the front. You're done. It's great. I will, sometimes I have on other patterns before done a short row section to add space for the bust as well. So I had to pick something to cast on New Year's Day. New year, new project, right? So I went through my stash and I found some more yarn that I picked up at the Portland Yarn Crawl back in the spring. So this is more Portland yarn. And let me pull out a skein so you can see it. This is Kelburn Woolen's Scout. Again, I have never worked with this yarn before. This is my first time working with it. It's a beautiful color. It's blue heather is the color. And you can see it's like almost iridescent. It has so much variation in the color. It's really, really beautiful. It is a 2-ply, and I am using it for cables, which is not maybe the best. It's not the worst either. But just generally speaking, cables are really good for a 3-ply yarn because the 3-ply yarn is going to be really round, right? Because you have 3. So if you think of my fingers as plies, like a 2-ply yarn, right? Like it's kind of flat, like it has 2 plies. It's got that flat dimension to it, right? If you added a 3rd ply, right, suddenly that's rounder. That's going to be round all the way. So whenever you're knitting cables, which are very 3-dimensional, they literally pop out from the background. This round 3-ply yarn will really make the cables pop. So I'm using a 2-ply yarn, so the cables aren't like popping like crazy. And also there's so much color variation in this, which is like kind of wild. I feel like it's almost distracting from the cables a little bit. So let me show you. That's all to say, I'm not ripping back. Like this is what I'm doing and we're continuing. And of course it looks so much better on camera than it does in person. Yeah, you could just see the texture so much better on camera than in person. Yeah, the color variation and the fact that it's not like super, super round yarn, kind of like loses it a little bit in person. So this pattern is the Oben Vest by Thea Coleman. It's bottom up, it's a vest, it's cable all over, it's beautiful. And it has this really cool detail around the neck where there's like a sideways cable that kind of like braids around the edge of the neck. It's very cool. So this pattern, it's really beautiful and it's surprisingly complicated. So there are 3 different types of cables in this pattern without giving like too much away about the pattern. I have these are like faux cables. Then there's a little honeycomb cable column. And then it has these mirrored cables with a garter stitch panel in between, right? So none of these actually cross at the same rate. So every row, it's a different cables are crossing. Sometimes they all line up, sometimes they don't. Sometimes 2 of them line up, sometimes they don't. So you really have to pay attention to which row you're on in the pattern. And also, there is patterning on the rest rows. There is still like knit purl patterning beyond just the standard sort of like ribbing that cables take, right? You have like your reverse stockinette in between the cables, right? So because you have this garter panel in between the cables and you're knitting in the round, you have to purl it too. You have to knit and purl those panels. So there is patterning also on the rest rows. And once I got into this and I kind of realized that, I was like, oh, this is not going to be a project that I take out from the house at all. This is going to be like me with my coffee, you know, alert brain is going to be working on this. This is not late night. This is not chit-chatting. This is, you need to kind of pay attention to what you're doing. So it might be a little bit more slow going, and also, you know, it's cable, so it's a little more slow going. But yeah, I cast this on January 1st. Today is January 8th, I believe. Sure. Yes, it's 8th. I think. I don't know. Does it matter? Does it matter if it's the 7th or the 8th? I don't think it does. It's Thursday, if that matters. Okay. So I swatched for this pattern, and I swatched in the cable chart because why wouldn't I? And then I went to the pattern and the gauge was for stockinette. I was like, why would I knit a stockinette swatch if there's no stockinette in this pattern? But as I thought about it more, I was like, no, that makes sense because there's 3 different cables. So then it's like, well, how do you gauge for all three different, because they're all going to pull in at different rates, I think. Anyway, so I measured my swatch, and it seemed like I was hitting stockinette gauge with my cables. And it's like, well, that's not right. Because cables pull in, they contract the fabric. So they end up with a compressed gauge compared to stockinette. And I wasn't loving the fabric that I was getting on the swatch either. So I was thinking just aesthetically, I wanted to go down a needle size to have a little bit more of a firm fabric that wasn't quite as open, to make the cables read better. So I have my swatch in here, compared to what it ended up being. Let's see if you can see a difference. Yeah, you can definitely see that, like, on the actual garment, like, these cables are working up tighter because I went down a needle size. So I figured also from the swatch, if I went down a needle size, that should help me be closer to gauge. So I just kind of made some assumptions about gauge, about sizing, because it's such a big pattern repeat, the difference between the sizes is pretty significant. There was like 6 inches between each size, right? And the smaller size would have given me 0 ease. The next size up would have given me 6 inches of ease, which for a vest is frankly just too much. So I made some assumptions and said that's gonna compress it. So I wasn't quite sure which size to pick. So I picked the larger size, because also that would have been like the 4th or 5th size in the series of sizes, which generally speaking, whenever I'm picking my size in a knitting pattern, it's usually the 4th or 5th size, right? No, way too big, way too big. I made it through the ribbing and realized, like, this is just giant. Like, I do not want a vest with a ton of ease. Like, I want this to be a little bit more classy, a little bit more tailored. I'm gonna be wearing it over probably like button-up shirts. That's also another thing that I had been thinking was I'm gonna be wearing this over the top of things. So let's opt for the larger size just to be safe. But it was just way too big, way too big. So I tore it out and I started over, and I considered trying to figure out a way to make the stitch count between those 2 sizes. But in the end, I just ended up casting on the next size down, which is supposed to give a 44-inch bust, which I have a 44-inch bust. And again, I'm going to be wearing it over top of things. But I also think that's fine. If you have 0 ease across the bust, it's going to have a couple inches of ease throughout the rest of the body. Like, that should be fine. And also, again, this yarn is like pretty drapey. It doesn't have like a ton of memory to it. Another reason why it's maybe not the best yarn for cables, but I'm using it for cables anyway. So I imagine that once this is done, it's gonna relax quite a bit, right? It's gonna stretch out. It's gonna, once you block it too, it's gonna, right? So I think it's gonna be just fine, because whenever I hold it up to myself now, it's like, oh yeah, that's gonna be like 0 ease, right? So I think I'm right on. So I just need to carry on. And I am using these adorable little stitch markers on here. So on my last trip this fall, when I was in the Netherlands, I was in Amsterdam, and I went to Stephen and Penelope, the yarn shop, and I spent so much money there that they gave me free things. So I got these cute little bicycle stitch markers. So they're my little Amsterdam stitch markers. They're so cute. Come on. There it is. Well, you get the deal. Yeah, so these are my 2 garments that I'm working on right now. I have yarn on order to cast something else on. about that when we get there. Okay, so I think that's everything for today. I will be back to join you all again in a couple of weeks and show you my progress and bring you back into the studio with me to do something else fun. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you all are having a lovely start of 2025. It feels weird for me. I don't know about you, but it feels weird for me. So let's just keep crafting and keep on keeping on. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.